Hi, I'm Jay Lessinger, and I am the director of River of Dreams.
Hi, my name's Michelle Storrs-Ryan, and I was the music director for River of Dreams.
We did this show because it actually had somewhat of a reputation here in Catskill, New York. Hudson Talbott, who is a very well-known children's book illustrator and writer, had written a book called River of Dreams, which is the story of the Hudson River, the history of the Hudson River. Very, very successful and really wonderful book. About 10 years ago, a local composer here, Frank Cuthbert, decided that he would turn it into a musical for young people. And there was production done, I think in 2009, and it was very successful, and people in town have talked about it ever since. And our local theater, Bridge Street Theater, decided that it was time to do a new production of it. And John Soule, producer there, asked me to direct it, asked Michelle to be music director. So we did a new production of it. One of the things we wanted to do was create a production that we could then send around to other schools to allow them to emulate that or use it as an example for their own production. And in so doing, I wanted to find a way to do the show economically, something that anyone could produce easily. We did use projections of Hudson's illustrations as part of the show, which come as part of the package. We have been very lucky to have funding from the Bay and Paul Foundation, who are urging this production to be done by other schools as an educational tool to introduce American students to the importance of the Hudson River and the Hudson Valley, which is really kind of where American history started. We're right in that area.
Very simple set, very simple costume designing. For this production, we chose to use only middle school students because they still had that eagerness to learn, that excitement to learn about something new, the excitement to sing, and not as serious theatrical students as what a high school student would be. And they really took away fantastic memories, and they're still singing the songs even well after the production has closed. And they all now have just a more profound connection, a more profound appreciation of this river that is literally right here in our backyard, which was fantastic for the students that were involved. We used 20 middle school students ranging from grades 6th grade through 8th grade. They were all choral students of mine, and then from those 20 students we then casted certain key characters from the book. We had just a very basic audition process, just seeing, what personalities were like. They came in, they sang a little bit song from us, they read from the script a little bit, but it was very simple just to give them that audition experience and let them know that, hey, this is what it's like to audition for live theater. It was really awesome to watch the light bulb go off and, oh, that's what that meant when we learned about that. Because it's one thing to learn it in the classroom, but it's another to absolutely experience it, which is really what these students were doing. They were experiencing history in how we were producing it on stage.
And the Hudson River is part of their curriculum, right?
Yes.
It's in one of their classes.
Yes.
Yeah. So the show has essentially 11 musical numbers, and each one of those numbers highlights a different historical event or period on the river. When I was deciding how we should produce it or what the look of the show should be, again, I wanted to find something that was relatively economical for any school to produce. The main prop in the show is a bed, because the first illustration in Hudson's book is young Hudson looking out his window and kind of seeing New York City and the Hudson and hoping that one day he would get there. And so he uses that for the inspiration for the book. So I like the idea of the bed, because the bed then became many things in the show. It became a number of different boats. It became a train. Of course, it was used as a bed. It was used as a ferry boat going to Ellis Island. And then for props, again, I kept it very simple. One of the numbers is about the ice industry on the Hudson River, where they cut blocks of ice. And I thought, well, how are we going to show that on stage? And I came up with the idea of using banker's boxes, those white storage boxes, as a prop for that. So we had a number of those boxes, and they got utilized throughout the show. And then there are places where we need rifles. There are places where we needed ice saws. There were places where we needed, shovels, things like that. So we came up with the idea of just using, I think they were like 1 or 2 inch dowels, which would get used in different scenes, and just by by the way they were being manipulated or by the way they were being used, it'd be very clear what they were supposed to be. So those are the major props. And then for costuming, the kids just wore jeans and black shirts, and Michelle Rogers, our costume designer, then accessorized them. So by changing their hats, by putting on shawls, scarves, gloves, different costume elements that were easy to change quickly, they became the different characters in the different periods, and it worked very, very, very well. So I'm going to talk you through some of the different numbers of the show and kind of what they're about, what my approach was. Michelle will talk about it musically. The first is the introduction, which is the title song, River of Dreams. And the young boy is sitting on his bed, wondering what it would be like to see the Hudson River for real. And the fact is, there is a character that is the river, and in this case was played by a young woman. Molly, the young lady who sang this, comes on stage and introduces herself and said, I am the river, and I'm going to take you on this trip. And the cast comes out and sings River of Dreams and gets the story going.
And Molly is very much like your guide throughout this whole journey. She's leading Hudson through the different history, and so she's utilized a lot in the numbers. So it's important that whoever you do cast, Hudson does have solos, the guide also has solos, so you want to make sure that the two students that you choose for those roles are confident with singing solos by themselves, because they are going to do it quite often in the show.
The next number is called Driven Man, and it is all about Henry Hudson discovering the river, coming up the river to this area. Now, he was a controversial figure because indeed he made some amazing discoveries, but he was not known for the treatment of his men. And in fact, on I think his second trip up the Hudson, they mutinied on him, and they put him and his son on a rowboat and sent them off, never to be seen again. That's not in the show, but it's certainly hinted at in the sense that clearly he's not treating his sailors right, and as they sail off with him, you get the sense that maybe we won't ever see him again. The next song is called What's Up with George. Now, there are two Georges in the song. One is George Washington, and the other one is George III, the King of England, at the time of the American Revolution. And indeed, this song is about the conflict between those two groups, between the Americans and the English. A lot of marching in this number. I should say that none of the numbers are particularly long. I think the numbers are about 2 to 3 minutes.
No more than 3 minutes.
You know, they're very short, but really it is very much, and I mean this seriously, the genius of Frank Cuthbert, that he could take these ideas and musicalize them very succinctly. I should also say that one of Hudson's gifts is that he can take actually very big ideas and distill them down for young people so that they understand them without talking down to them. And I think Frank picked up on that musically in his lyrics. The next number is the Old Dutch Sloop. As the river developed, different forms of naval transportation developed, and the first boats that came up the river, of course, were sailboats, and in the Old Dutch Sloop were introduced to the Dutch sloop, which was the main form of transportation on the river for a number of years in the late 18th and early 19th century.
One of the things musically that you'll start to notice throughout all the different songs is that the majority of the songs are in unison. So the kids are all singing the same part. There were a couple places where we added in a little bit of harmonies. As they're singing the song, the focus is telling the story and getting the history, not so much about the harmony of the music, so that we're not taking away from the story itself. So the music, when you first look at it, there's all these musical numbers, but they're really, for the most part, in unison, so it's very easy for the kids to learn and quick to pick up on.
Right. So the next number is Clinton's Ditch. DeWitt Clinton was the governor of New York in the middle part of the 19th century, and came up with the idea of creating a canal that would connect the Hudson River with the Great Lakes. And that became, of course, the Erie Canal. This is the number the kids loved
Loved
because it's a really up number. It's very rhythmic. I had them, digging and with their sticks on stage, and it really was the number I think they loved the most. The next number is ice. As I mentioned earlier, in the 19th century, one of the big industries of the Hudson River was ice harvesting. Of course, we have refrigeration now. We don't worry about ice, but in those days, if you wanted to keep something cool, you need large blocks of ice. This was the place where I developed the idea of using these banker boxes, painted white, to be these blocks. So as as the number progresses, the kids are cutting the blocks and then stacking them up to the point where they're almost completely covered by the blocks at the end.
It was really interesting in that number because the kids never really grasped that concept of what ice harvesting was and why they needed to do that back then. But by the end, they had this newfound appreciation for that aspect of history that coming into this project, they didn't really know that much about.
Absolutely.
So that was really awesome to see that growth in their knowledge there.
And we tried to use the show as a learning tool for the kids. I mean, the whole point was to show them not only just what the history of the river is, but also how people lived in the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries. I think we introduced them to a lot of history that they hadn't been exposed to yet in the school.
Yes.
The next number is called Inspiration. And in Inspiration, we introduce the audience and the kids to the different artistic people who developed up here. We in Catskill are very proud of Thomas Cole, who was the first American artist who was painting the Hudson River, and was eventually the Hudson River Landscape School developed here because of Thomas Cole. Frederick Church was his student and disciple, went on to become even more famous, and Asher Durant was another famous painter of the Hudson River, and also there were a number of famous authors, John Fenimore Cooper and Washington Irving. So they're all pictured in this wonderful ballad about how the river has inspired all these different artistic forms and are still influencing artists and writers till to today.
And again, through that song, through the lyrics, the students were making those historical connections, those educational connections. So when you're talking about Cooper, like, oh, that's Cooperstown, that's where the Baseball Hall of Fame is, and oh, church, look at the Thomas Cole House. Yeah, I've been there. Like, this is who we're talking about. So having that connection there, it was awesome watching that light bulb go off on them.
The next number is Big Train Coming. Now, by the middle of the 19th century, of course, the trains came along, and this number is about the influence of the trains. In fact, again, it was a number the kids liked because they got to be a big train on stage. We used the bed as the engine, and it's very rhythmic. It's almost like a dancing number.
What we did with that number is you'll see in the performance, you see how the students, where the train actually detaches from the bed. We approached some of our high school art students, and they were the ones that actually painted the train concept. So that's a way to incorporate some high school students into the production, especially for those in the visual arts field there, to kind of blend in with that.
Yeah, they really did a great job. I mean, the illustrations really looked. I mean, the painting really did look like the illustrations in the book. It was great. The next number, and I think it's probably the most beautiful number in the piece, is called Ellis Island Story. And it is about the immigrants who came through Ellis Island through the latter part of the 19th century and into the 20th century. It's a very simple ballad. I think it's a song that should be sung all over the country by young people. It's really, really beautiful. And in staging it, I made it very simple. I mean, the bed was on stage, and I just had the kids all come out, and now they were carrying bundles, they were wearing babushkas and shawls, the women, the gentlemen, the boys were wearing, hats of the period. I wanted them to look like they had made that struggle, that they had come across the Atlantic in boats that were not comfortable, that were overloaded, and by the time they arrived here, they were exhausted. But Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty were inspirations to them, and the number kind of grows through that. It's really quite moving, and as I said, I think it's a number every young person in this country should know. It's beautiful.
It's just a beautiful song, just absolutely beautifully written.
The audience loved it. I mean,
absolutely.
And the kids loved it because I think it was, in some ways, the most challenging.
Yes.
When you do things that are fast and rhythmic, that's easier for young singers. Mm-hmm. This number has a real line to it. It's got long phrases, and they had to work on that, but they got it.
Yeah, it was a challenge for them.
But they did a great job with it. Yeah.
Sludge.
So the next song is called Sludge, and it is all about the pollution in the Hudson River and the whole ecological change that happened over a period of many years. Frankly, the Hudson River was the sewer for all the communities up and down, not only just New York, but all the way to the headwaters. And over the years, of course, that had a huge impact. And with the coming of industrialization in the 19th century, there was a lot of garbage and chemicals and basically crap thrown in, so that by the time of the 1960s and 70s, the river was pretty much dead. There's a wonderful illustration of the book showing what the Hudson looked like, or evoking even the smell of the Hudson by that point. There were movements to improve the quality of the water of the river, and they are ongoing. So the song is ultimately optimistic, since it lets us know that things can change if we all make the effort. And I think the kids really got into this. I had them crawling all over the floor because I said, you get to be sludge, which they loved. And they were carrying garbage bags and all kinds of, garbage with them, throwing it around. And they loved it,
It's definitely inspirational in the fact that, we can make changes for the better. We have to make changes for the better.
And, it is an important message. I mean, it ends very clearly saying we have got to continue this. We have to be vigilant. We are in an era, of course, of climate change caused by a lot of this pollution. And I think Frank's song really, and again, Hudson's illustrations really bring this point across very strongly. So the show ends on an optimistic note with a reprise of the title song, River of Dreams. The cast comes out and reminds all of us how important the river has been in our lives and will continue to be ongoing. For me, I'm a professional theater director, and I do mostly opera, but I do some theater as well. But it was so wonderful to work in the school here. I had a great time. I learned so much. I think Michelle is pretty miraculous, because I think any teacher in this country who faces young people 8 hours a day with their energy and their attention spans and all of that are pretty amazing people.
It was very interesting too, because there were times I'm like, Jay, they're just middle school kids. Give them a break. Or they're not professionals. But it was awesome.
And they rose to the challenge.
They did.
They really
did.
did. We had a blast working together, and we had a blast working with these young people. And I think that you will produce this piece, you're going to find out its value, not only as a teaching tool to the students, but also the students who are watching it. I should also say that we did 4 performances in a 90-seat black box theater, which is Bridge Street Theater here in Catskill. But then a few days later, we took it to both the middle school and the elementary school, which was really interesting because we didn't have a lot of time to rehearse in those spaces, and the stages were completely different in layout. But it was so much fun because the kids really adapted very quickly to the new environment.
The thing about this show is that regardless of what your stage size limitations are, it is extremely adaptable to any stage.
Well, it really does prove the value of the arts. Some kids are great at sports, some are great at performing and singing. Whatever it is that gets them to work as a group is important, and I watched this group of students really grow tremendously over the 3 weeks that we were working together, in their sense of responsibility for each other, the responsibility for themselves, for their focus and concentration. So in one day in the schools, we exposed 800 students to the history of the Hudson River. And I really urge you to take on this project. It's a wonderful piece to work on, and I know you'll all have a great deal of fun. This, by the way, is the CD. And it's very easy to find Hudson's book. It's obviously available on Amazon, and I encourage you to look at the material and do it. Along with this video, there will be information for whom to contact about materials, performance materials, what arrangements need to be made, and hopefully information on how to apply for some funding that may be a startup fund to help you produce a production of your own.